All right. Good morning, good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining our webinar today on expanding access to high quality dual enrollment through a unique teacher qualification model. My name is Sam Riggs. I'm a leader at Education Northwest and one of the authors on this study. Before we begin, I just want to introduce the full team that's behind this work. Michelle Hodera is the director of the Oregon Longitudinal Data Collaborative. That's the program that manages Oregon's statewide longitudinal data system and the lead author of this study. Eric Juneman is the Career Connected Learning Specialist at the Oregon Higher Education Coordinating Commission. Christelle McGregor is the Accelerated Learning Specialist at the Oregon Department of Education. And Aaron Weeksorp is the Academic Policy Specialist at the Oregon Higher Education Coordinating Commission. Eric, Christelle, and Aaron have all been close partners with Michelle and I throughout all phases of this study, and you'll have an opportunity to hear from them directly during the panel. So this is our agenda for our time. As we get started, please go ahead and share your name and your organization in the chat so we can see who's here. We're going to start with a briefing on the study. We'll share how and why the sponsored dual credit model was developed in Oregon and how it's being implemented across the state today. Next, we'll share findings from our research, focus on how sponsored dual credit is expanding access to college credit in the high school and the impact of college credit in the high school on student outcomes. We'll conclude the briefing with a discussion of implications from this research for both Oregon and other states that are looking to expand access to college credit in the high school. Following the briefing, we'll have about 10 minutes for a Q&A about the study. Please feel free to enter your questions in the Q&A box during the session, and we'll do our best to respond to those during this time. If you don't see the Q&A option on your screen, you may need to click the More button, and then you should be able to see it. And then after the Q&A, we're excited to have a panel discussion with the state education agency leaders that we introduced from ODE and HEC. I will turn it to you, Michelle, to get us started.
Thank you, Sam. All right, I'm going to start with some of our study background. So there's a lot of research that shows that dual enrollment is a promising strategy to support high school students' transition to college and post-secondary education attainment. And as an aside, we use the term dual enrollment in this study and presentation to refer to college-level courses that high school students can take to earn college credit. In Oregon, these courses are called dual credit, and they are taught in the high school by high school teachers. Oregon also uses the terms college credit in the high school to refer to the variety of models that give high school students the opportunity to earn college credit. So we know foundationally that dual enrollment is a promising strategy, but states have long grappled with expanding access to dual enrollment due in part to the limited number of high school teachers who are qualified to teach these courses. In many cases, high school teachers must meet the same qualifications as college instructors. This usually means having graduate level credits or a master's degree in the dual enrollment subject they teach. However, many high school teachers have a bachelor's degree in their subject area and a master's degree in education or teaching. The challenge with expanding access to dual enrollment is more pronounced for low-income and rural schools, which are less likely to have access to teachers that are qualified to teach dual enrollment, and thus their students are less likely to have access to these college credit opportunities with promising outcomes. Oregon has worked to expand access to dual enrollment through a model called sponsored dual credit. In this model, the high school teacher does not have to meet the same instructor qualifications to teach the course as the college faculty member, and instead qualifies via participation in ongoing professional learning and training with a sponsoring post-secondary institution. While other states have explored similar strategies, Oregon is unique in that the sponsored dual credit model has scaled across the state. This is the first study of sponsored dual credit, and it's intended to provide policy-relevant evidence about a college credit model with unique teacher qualification requirements. The study is funded by the Dual Enrollment Research Fund. The Dual Enrollment Research Fund has funded 6 projects across the nation to explore dual enrollment in ways that will actionably inform policy and practice and seek to expand student access and success to these promising programs. So our study draws on many data sources to tell the story of sponsored dual credit. First, we draw on document review of Oregon public post-secondary institutions' self-study submissions. The self-study submission is a set of documents due every 6 years to Oregon's state higher education agency, the Higher Education Coordinating Commission, or HEC. They outline how the community college or university is meeting state standards for college credit in the high school. These documents include a narrative summary and artifacts of evidence for each standard. To conduct this study, HEC requested and received permission to share these self-study documents with us from the community colleges and universities with approved sponsored dual credit courses. We then conducted an in-depth document review and analysis to understand how sponsored dual credit is implemented in practice, focusing on the faculty standards that make sponsored dual credit distinct from dual credit. We also collected a small amount of qualitative data in late 2025 to better understand the experiences of high school teachers teaching dual credit and sponsored dual credit. The qualitative data collection included interviews with high school teachers teaching dual credit courses in computer science, education, English, math, and Spanish, and their post-secondary partners. Finally, we developed a novel integrated data set using student-level data that identifies enrollment in different types of college credit in the high school and connects data on student demographics, course taking, and high school and post-secondary outcomes. We use course-level data from HEC collected through the state's self-study and peer review process, which identifies the model, dual credit or sponsored dual credit, through which each college credit in the high school course is approved. Using course and teacher information, we match these course-level data to K-12 course enrollment records to identify every high school student in the state enrolled in a college credit in the high school course and the model under which that course was approved. This data linkage provides a complete picture of high school students participating in college credit in the high school, and for the first time helps address empirical questions regarding the extent to which students enroll in different college credit in the high school models and whether there are differences in impact based on the model. So I'm going to give you some background on Oregon's implementation of this unique dual enrollment teacher qualification model. So sponsored dual credit was created in rural Oregon around 2010 with the direct purpose of expanding access to college credit opportunities for rural Oregon students. And our report provides a lot more detail on the history of this model and the details of this model that you can dig into after the presentation. So based on promising initial findings from Eastern Oregon, the state developed a grant program to replicate the model. And from 2013 to 2019, the Oregon State Legislature allocated funding to award regional promise grants to consortia of school districts, education service districts, community colleges, and universities to expand access to college credit in the high school. Parallel and in response to the implementation of regional promise grants, HEC adopted standards for 3 college credit in the high school models. Oregon standards for dual credit are aligned with the National Alliance of Concurrent Enrollment Partnerships, NACEP, standards. Oregon standards for sponsored dual credit and assessment-based learning are unique to Oregon, and they promote the high-impact practices that are represented in the NACEP national standards. These grants have ended, but starting in 2022, 16 out of 22 public institutions that offer college credit in the high school are approved to offer sponsored dual credit. Sponsored dual credit is widespread in Oregon and growing at a faster rate than other forms of college credit in the high school. So over time, the number of sponsored dual credit has increased despite the ending of regional promise grant funding in 2018-19 and a significant drop in the number of courses offered in 2020-21, where Oregon high schools and post-secondary institutions operated remotely because of COVID-19. From 21-22 to 23-24, you can see here that there's been an increase in the number of sponsored dual credit courses compared to no growth in the number of dual credit and assessment-based learning courses. In the 2023-24 school year, 28% of college credit in the high school courses were sponsored dual credit, representing 1,429 courses and more than 28,000 students taking these courses. Oregon sponsored dual credit faculty standards provide guidance on how teachers are qualified to teach college credit in the high school. What sets sponsored dual credit apart from dual credit is that high school teachers are not required to have the same academic credentials as a college faculty member teaching the course. They engage in more frequent professional learning and interaction with college faculty members, most commonly through professional learning communities. They receive feedback for continuous improvement, often through classroom observation and the practice of norming or calibrating grading. And they receive access to essential resources comparable to what college faculty have. So teachers qualified through sponsored dual credit are required to meet at least once per term with their sponsoring faculty member. And there are three main ways in Oregon these interactions take place: professional learning communities, the PLCs, individual mentorship, or co-teaching. PLCs between high school teachers and a faculty mentor who teaches the course at the college or university are the most common form of interaction. PLCs can take place in person, online, or in a hybrid format. This allows partnerships in rural and geographically widespread areas to meet the standards. High school teachers interviewed for this study shared positive experiences with PLCs, and we have one quote here, and there's many more quotes in the study. But this math teacher said, "Just having a PLC with other math teachers is incredible. Getting to talk about what we're teaching and the ways that we're teaching and some games that we play to help teach, or how do you review and what do your tests look like and can they use notes and all that kind of stuff is very, very helpful." So what does it take to implement and sustain sponsored dual credit? Sponsored dual credit does typically require more time and resources than dual credit. Faculty members are compensated or have course releases to oversee the high school teacher's discipline-specific orientation and ongoing professional development, and the course curriculum and assessments. High school teachers use their planning time or receive substitutes from the district to engage in the required professional learning and training activities. Despite the extra time and resources required, we heard that the model is viable, and you can see in the data that it's growing. It's even preferred when there are two key conditions in place. One, educators view offering college credit in the high school as an essential student success strategy. And two, the interaction between educators is based in mutual respect and collaboration. A post-secondary partner at a rural college told us, quote, "I feel like our faculty are awesome and want to do it, and they like it as well. I think the only concern is just the time and capacity. This is the work they want to be doing. They are excited to do these sponsored dual credit trainings and the mentorship piece. It's the work that they really enjoy and resonate with. They understand the need and the importance for sponsored dual credit and reaching our more rural areas that might be considered dual credit deserts, that maybe they don't have the traditional type credentialing. Students don't have access to other options because they're so far away from a campus and can't drive in. So I think they understand the importance of sponsored dual credit." So now I'm going to turn it over to my co-author, Sam, to talk about sponsored dual credit's impact on access and student outcomes.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. So I'm going to start by sharing some of the findings around how sponsored dual credit is expanding access to college credit in the high school. These findings come from analysis of the integrated student level data set that includes all 9th through 12th grade students who were enrolled in public schools in the state between 2018-19 and 23-24. Our first finding is that sponsored dual credit is increasing access to college credit opportunities during high school. So in this figure, we're decomposing students' annual participation in college credit in the high school coursework into two mutually exclusive groups. The first group, which is shown in dark green, the bottom part of the bars in the figure, includes all students who enrolled in any dual credit course during the academic year. Students in this group may have also enrolled in a sponsored dual credit course, but we assume that even in the absence of sponsored dual credit, these students still would have participated in college credit in the high school during the academic year. The second group of students, the light green at the top of the bars, includes students who only enrolled in sponsored dual credit during the academic year. Importantly, we're assuming that students in this latter group would not have participated in college credit in the high school without sponsored dual credit. So this distinction allows us to approximate how access to college credit in the high school increased as a result of sponsored dual credit. Since 2021, we can see that overall participation in college credit in the high school is increasing from 36% of 9th through 12th grade students to 43% of these students during a 23-24 school year. And in the latest year of data, we see that participation in college credit in the high school is 10 percentage points higher due to sponsored dual credit. This represents a roughly 30% increase off the base rate of 34%. And before moving on, I just want to note that data were not collected during the 2019-20 academic year due to COVID, which is why you don't see a bar in that year. Well, we see participation in college credit in the high school increased by about 10 percentage points overall. As this figure shows, gains were slightly larger for students attending high schools in town and rural parts of the state, helping to close access gaps between rural and urban areas. For example, without sponsored dual credit, students attending schools in suburban locales were 4 percentage points more likely to participate in college credit in high school compared to students in town locales, and 8 percentage points more likely than students in rural locales. With sponsored dual credit, we can see that students in city, suburban, and town locales are equally likely to participate in college credit in the high school, and the participation gap between suburban and rural locales was cut in half from 8 to 4 percentage points. The rural trends that we observe statewide are mirrored across counties throughout Oregon. The map on the left side of the screen shows the percentage of 9th through 12th grade students in each county who enrolled in at least one dual credit course in 23-24. The darker the shading, the higher the participation rate, and counties without any dots or hashing are considered rural. The map on the right shows the percentage of students who enrolled in dual credit and/or sponsored dual credit in the same year. So comparing the two maps, we can see large increases in participation across many rural counties. For example, in rural Wasco County, participation increased from 2% to 42% with the inclusion of sponsored dual credit. And in Wallowa County, participation increased from 44% to 81%. Lastly, in terms of access, we see that sponsored dual credit is increasing participation in college credit in the high school at approximately equal rates across student racial and ethnic groups, meaning that inequities in participation in college credit coursework persist with the addition of sponsored dual credit. For example, students identified in the data as Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander and Black and African American continue to have the lowest participation rates, while students identified as white and Asian continue to have some of the highest participation rates. We also observed similar patterns for other student characteristics, including whether a student was classified as an English learner, had an individualized education program, or was in migrant education. Participation gaps between students who were and were not classified as English learners and who did and did not have an IEP have actually grown slightly with the introduction of sponsored dual credit. So while sponsored dual credit has contributed to large gains in students' overall participation in college credit in the high school and narrowing gaps between rural and urban parts of the state, it's not yet narrowing long-standing student-level gaps. So now I'm going to share some of the findings that examine the impact of college credit in the high school on student outcomes. So we used two different regression approaches to understand the impact of college credit in the high school on student outcomes and to explore whether those impacts differ for students who only take dual credit and those who only take sponsored dual credit. So our first approach is a regression analysis that includes all 9th through 12th grade students enrolled during the academic year. Students were assigned to one of 4 mutually exclusive groups based on their course taking experiences. Students who only took sponsored dual credit courses, students who only took dual credit courses, students who took both sponsored dual credit and dual credit, and students who took neither sponsored dual credit nor dual credit. We estimate a series of models that regress our outcome variable on this categorical indicator. We're examining both the differences in outcomes between students who took sponsored dual credit or dual credit compared to those who took neither, and we explore whether outcomes differ between students who only took sponsored dual credit and those who only took dual credit. We know that students in these 4 groups differ in observable and unobservable ways that are likely related to the outcomes. So to better disentangle the relationship between these different course-taking groups, we adjust for differences due to student demographics, academic achievement, including the count of different types of advanced coursework taken by the student, their high school, and the academic year. Our sample for these analyses includes all students who are enrolled in 9th through 12th grade public schools in Oregon between 1819 and 2324. This is more than 430,000 students across 539 schools, and more than half of these students had experiences with sponsored dual credit or dual credit. The approach allows us to use the full sample, but is subject to selection bias. We know that students' placement in one of the four groups is not random, even after adjusting for observable differences. These are not causal estimates. To address this limitation, we add a second approach that leverages a natural experiment in the data. The natural experiment focuses on instances in which the same college course was offered within the same high school and the same year under both sponsored dual credit and dual credit models. Our data include 124 of these course pairs, meaning there's at least one section of the course offered under dual credit and at least one section offered under sponsored dual credit. These courses were taught across 46 schools and enrolled more than 14,000 students. So each course pairing includes at least two sections of the course, and importantly, the only difference between the sections is that some are taught by teachers who are qualified to teach the course under sponsored dual credit, and some are taught by teachers who are qualified to teach under dual credit. To the student, the different section choices are equivalent, as the student does not know how the teacher is qualified to teach the course. In our conversations with the state's dual credit coordinators and interviews with high school teachers, we continue to hear that high school staff members who schedule college credit courses and help students enroll also do not know which sections are taught by a teacher qualified through sponsored dual credit or dual credit. So this setup provides a very strong opportunity to assess whether outcomes differ for students who take the sponsored dual credit version of the course compared to students who take the dual credit version of the course, and addresses some of the selection limitations found under our first approach. In the following slides, we're going to focus primarily on analyses from the first regression approach, utilizing the full sample, but the findings that we share are all robust to this natural experiment as well. So our first finding is that only a small share of students who take sponsored dual credit or dual credit courses register for and earn the corresponding college credits. And these course registration and credit earning rates are identical across the sponsored dual credit and dual credit models. So there are two figures here to convey this finding. The figure on the left side shows the regression adjusted probabilities that a student who enrolled in dual credit or sponsored dual credit registered for the associated college credits. And we're looking at this for three groups of students. So from the left, these are students who only took dual credit this year, students who only took sponsored dual credit this year, and students who took both dual credit and sponsored dual credit. The figure on the right shows the regression adjusted probabilities that the same sample of students earn the associated college credits. And as we can see, overall registration and credit earning rates are low, with around 24 to 29% of students who enroll in these college credit courses going on to register for and earn the college credit. In our analyses, we also find there's no statistical difference in credit registration and earning rates between students who only took dual credit and only took sponsored dual credit. And this holds in both the full sample, which we're looking at here, as well as the course pairs analyses. And while most students who enrolled in dual credit or sponsored dual credit did not go on to register for the associated college credits, these students were nonetheless more likely to take additional advanced coursework, which includes sponsored dual credit, advanced placement, and international baccalaureate in the following academic year. And again, these impacts were the same for students who took dual credit courses and those who took sponsored dual credit courses. So the purple bar, which wasn't shown on the last finding due to the outcome, represents students who never took dual credit or sponsored dual credit during the academic year. Just 57% of students in this group went on to take an advanced course in the next year, while 61% of students who took sponsored dual credit took an advanced course in the next year. In both the full sample and course pairs analyses, we find no difference in this outcome for students who took dual credit compared to students who took sponsored dual credit. We also find that among students who are continuously enrolled from 9th through 12th grade, so students who had the same opportunities to engage in advanced coursework throughout high school, those who took sponsored dual credit or dual credit during high school were about 2 percentage points more likely to graduate than those who never participated in these courses. Again, we find that impacts for sponsored dual credit are equal to those of dual credit in both the full sample and the course pairs. And next, we find that high school graduates who participated in sponsored dual credit or dual credit during high school are more likely to enroll in post-secondary education the following year. And the impacts, again, are not meaningfully different between the course groups. So this outcome is measured using National Student Clearinghouse data, so we're able to observe college enrollments nationally. As the figure shows, students who participated in sponsored dual credit were about 5.5 percentage points more likely to enroll in post-secondary education in the year after high school compared to observationally similar students who never took dual credit or sponsored dual credit during high school. In the full sample analyses, we find that students who participate in sponsored dual credit were slightly more likely to enroll in post-secondary education than students who only took dual credit during high school. But in our course pairs analyses, we find no differences between these two groups. Lastly, we looked at outcomes for students who went on to enroll in an Oregon public college or university after high school graduation. So prior to making any statistical adjustments, we found that students who took sponsored dual credit or dual credit in high school achieved stronger early momentum outcomes during their first year at an Oregon public college or university. Specifically, students who participated in dual credit and sponsored dual credit earned about 2.5 to 6 more college level credits, earned higher GPAs, and were about 6 to 13 percentage points more likely to attempt a college level math course, all measured during the first year of post-secondary education after high school. Once we adjusted for some important differences across these four groups, including the number of each type of advanced course taken by students during high school, these differences largely disappeared. One exception, however, was college level math. We found that students who enrolled in dual credit or sponsored dual credit during high school were more likely to attempt a college level math course in their first year at an Oregon public college or university. And there were no differences between students who only took dual credit and those who only took sponsored dual credit. So to summarize all these findings to a couple of points. First, we see that sponsored dual credit is expanding access to college credit in the high school across the state, and especially in rural areas. But there are still important gaps in participation by student race, ethnicity, and other characteristics, including English learner status, and whether a student had an individualized education program. Two, students who participate in college credit in the high school are more likely to take advanced coursework in the next academic year, more likely to graduate high school on time, and more likely to enroll in post-secondary education in the year following high school graduation. And three, most importantly, there are no differences in these outcomes between students who take dual credit and those who take sponsored dual credit. I will turn things back to Michelle to share some of the implications from this work.
Thank you, Sam. So to conclude, we found that Oregon has led an innovative strategy to expand access to college credit in the high school. Oregon's sponsored dual credit model has expanded access, particularly in rural regions of the state, and the impact of sponsored dual credit on student outcomes is equal to that of dual credit. A dual credit teacher we spoke to described the study findings as validating Oregon's unique model of qualifying dual credit teachers. They said, quote, "I think the data is super fascinating, and I think it's validating for what we're trying to do in our building. This means students are getting a common experience regardless of who their faculty member is. On the back end, behind the scenes, that's getting shored up, and so students don't feel any kind of difference, and I think that's incredible." So we're going to offer 4 implications and lessons learned. First, the quality of K-12 post-secondary interaction is just as important as faculty credentialing. In Oregon, high school students benefit from enrollment in college credit in the high school, regardless of how their high school teacher was qualified to teach the college course, demonstrating the importance of high-quality K-12 post-secondary interaction. Oregon's sponsored dual credit faculty standards provide guidance on frequency of interaction between high school teachers and faculty, roles and responsibilities, use of feedback for continuous improvement, and access to essential resources to ensure course quality and alignment. Second, maintain high standards across the state for college credit in the high school, but allow for flexibility so that partnerships in geographically widespread areas can meet the standards. Oregon adopted NACEP-aligned standards, but allows for variation in how these standards are implemented. Interaction between high school teachers and faculty takes place through professional learning communities, individual mentorship, or co-teaching, and through in-person, online, or hybrid formats. The model works when institutions implement professional learning practices that work for their context and meet faculty standards for high-quality dual enrollment. Third, expanding access is necessary but not sufficient for equity. Offering more courses in more schools did not close participation gaps, particularly for multilingual learners and students with individual education plans. Structural barriers such as reclassification policies and course placement policies and educator mindsets about who belongs in dual enrollment must also be addressed. Fourth, pilot, evaluate, and then scale. Oregon's model started as a grassroots program in rural Oregon, was scaled through state funding and sustained through formal state standards. Early evaluation built political and institutional will for investment. To conclude, we offer a potential approach for other states interested in Oregon's model. First, examine your existing professional development practices for college credit in the high school. Assess where overlap exists with Oregon-sponsored dual credit standards, and develop a professional development model to qualify high school teachers to teach dual enrollment. Second, pilot the professional development model with high school teachers who do not have the necessary credentials, for example, the same instructor qualifications as college faculty members teaching the course, allowing them to offer college credit in the high school. Third, evaluate the model's impact on student outcomes. And fourth, develop guidance on effective models of professional development that facilitate greater access to high quality dual enrollment. So that concludes our study summary. We're going to answer questions from the Q&A. I started to answer them, but we can elaborate on ones I answered, and we can answer as many as we can now. So while Sam's bringing that up, I answered a question from Shannon about accreditation. So sponsored dual credit does meet accreditation policies in Oregon, and Oregon is a union state, which is why faculty members who participate in this model have course releases and are compensated, either or both. I don't know if their state folks want to add anything to that first question before we move on. I answered it, so it's in the answered section.
Um, it was a very long pause, and I'll just add that during the development of the state standards, we were able to have some engagement with the regional accrediting body and ensure that the requirements we were including in the standards didn't conflict or contradict with what the accrediting body was asking of our colleges and universities. And so that's, if you're developing something, that is a good check-in point and a good point. And the same goes for our faculty unions. We did have input from our unions during the process and a lot of constructive feedback and vigilance, right, about protecting faculty time. And we have implemented in a way that is constantly reminding our institutions and our departments to value that faculty time and include it in many of our institutions, included in the faculty contract, the work with our high school partners.
Yeah, and this study, it would be another study to dig into these questions more, but the data shows that this model is increasing. And so the institutions are clearly coming up with ways to facilitate this model and make sure it works for faculty within their union and accreditation policies.
I see that Shannon has a hand raised. I don't know if you have a follow-up to this question, Shannon, that you're able to voice over or enter into the chat. Okay, we'll keep an eye out. So I see, looking at some questions that are entered in the Q&A, we have a question from Carlos about, so how does this study contribute to the divergence of course placement, high school teacher versus college faculty, in terms of differences in short-term and long-term outcomes? So if I'm understanding, I think what we're seeing we looked sort of as far as we could look in the data that we had for this study as far out into what was happening in that first year of post-secondary education for a pretty unique sample of students who have graduated from the Oregon high school and then enrolled in Oregon post-secondary institution. We didn't have an opportunity to track students further out in National Student Clearinghouse data, for example, to see persistence and completion, but would be helpful to understand that. But what we do see in the data is that there are not differences between these two models that are offered in Oregon. There's a second part to your question about sort of the type of institution, post-secondary institution that is offering the sponsorship. And if we would expect to see sort of differences, there's not a lot, to your point about institutional selectivity, purpose through academic offerings, Carnegie classification in the state and the institutions that are sponsoring institutions. There's not a lot of variation in institutional sort of those characteristics. We did a little bit of exploration in our data to sort of see if there were any differences around who partnering institutions were, and that wasn't something that came through as driving any of the results. I see a next question I see is if there's impacts on course transferability, either for students who stay in state or enroll out of state. That's a great question. It's not something that we were able to look at in these data at this point, but it's something that would be really helpful to understand in the future.
Yeah, I will add that a lot of the courses students are taking are these common courses, or they have common course numbers, which is becoming more standard and official, but they're, your college algebra course and English composition, Spanish 101, Spanish 101, or your higher level Spanish courses. So there's a lot of courses that are a part of the general education curriculum across the state. That's kind of what the most common courses are.
Which I think is getting a bit to Jason's question about the courses that teachers are qualified to teach. I can speak to that, but Aaron, Eric, Crystal, if you want to share insights on that too.
Well, they're qualified to teach. The high school teacher partners with a faculty mentor who teaches that course at the college, at the community college or public university. So they're qualified to teach that course that's articulated with that particular institution. And oftentimes that course is common enough that it's transferable across the state, but that depends on what the course is.
Yeah, I can add a little bit. Just from the K-12 perspective, a lot of times these courses are initiated through district demand. A district says, hey, we need a college algebra class. We need a college writing class. And they'll reach out to the institution, their local institution, to say, hey, can you partner with us? And then if that institution doesn't have capacity, which does happen, then they get a release to go to other institutions. So people aren't just offering whatever course. A lot of times this is really dependent on here's what we need at this school. And the barrier to expanding access has often been, and I do see like expanding access as far as overall participation does not equal closing gaps, but the barrier to expanding access has been qualified instructors, having instructors. The college will say, no, we're full, we're done, we can't. And so this has been really a way of how can we get more access to this for students without asking more of our college faculty or more than they're able to provide. That these partnerships have allowed us to just add additional classes, especially in places where our high school teachers are less likely to have the qualifications to be qualified to be the college instructor. So these partnerships have just allowed us to add those additional courses. And make those available to students.
Go on to Kenya's question.
Yeah, so Kenya, I see the question about students are taking these courses but not earning college credit. The second part about how these courses are weighted, I'm not sure that I understand that piece of the question. I can speak to the first part a little bit, and then if you're able to provide more context or if others understand that. that was something that I think anecdotally we've had a sense for in Oregon, that there are students who are enrolling in courses at the high school that have where there's an opportunity to earn the college credit, but not necessarily registering for those college credits because they're two separate processes. Um, until we were able to link the data in the way that we did for this study, we weren't able to see that. So this was the first real kind of statewide look into what those enrollment and registration patterns look like. And that's an area that we'd really like to dig into further to better understand what are those cases where individuals are enrolling in the course but not registering to earn the college credit.
I think maybe by weighting, you mean like GPA weighting at the high school level. And often these are, but that is a local district decision, and a lot of our districts do weight these as a 5 um, on a 4-point scale. So that does impact student participation patterns. It's interesting to me that our career and technical college credit courses often aren't weighted. So that's something I would like to look into more as well. But it was a surprise in some ways to see that we knew that not everyone signs up for the credit, but to see those patterns. So that's something I'm interested in following up on more too. Oh, just clarifying with Sam too. The our outcome data is that just that's not just for the students that enrolled in the course though. Is that for students who sat in the class or just students who enrolled?
Good clarification. So the outcomes that we looked at were for everybody who sat in the course, regardless of whether they registered for the college credit. Michelle, do you have thoughts on Evan's question? Anything from the interviews?
So that's a great question. I think we could also talk about what the state is doing to close those gaps. I do think we heard from a school that had like everybody takes dual credit, which turns into a lot of sponsored dual credit because there's so much dual credit, and there's a reading specialist that really is supporting students in these courses. That which was an interesting approach. Do you want to, Christadel, speak to I don't know if you want to skip ahead to the advising toolkit, but do you want to speak to that a little bit?
I would love to skip ahead to the advising toolkit.
Okay.
So we know that offering more courses didn't really change participation gaps. And so some of the things that we suspect from other research that's been done by the Community College Research Center and other folks is that a lot of this is outreach, like who we're inviting and who we're advising into these classes. So the state team here, Aaron, Eric, and I are currently working on an advising toolkit that has two main focuses. One is the more traditional, like how you navigate these courses and make sure you're connecting to your post-secondary destination for students who are deeply involved in this. But the other level is really an access level toolkit. How do we help districts do outreach to groups that typically don't, who have those opportunity gaps, who have those participation gaps, and doing that earlier, really our talking to our families in middle school, letting them know here's what you can expect in your high school, here are the opportunities available to you, here's how they can help you. And so I think a lot of that is like it's the mindset issue, who gets invited into these courses, and doing that, inviting earlier and in a way that is relevant to that family, that student, that community.
I just wanted to add to Evan's question in the Q&A that one other thing we're doing right now is we're piloting through our state standards, modeled off of NACEP standards. We're piloting a new continuous improvement 2 standard that asks colleges and universities to examine data to identify participation gaps and then share their plans to engage communities who are underrepresented in trying to close those gaps. So that's another thing we're doing.
I'll add one more idea to the closing equity gaps. It was really important for us to have this finding in order to push forward with our work in changing mindsets and implementing policies both at the state and the district level that are more welcoming to more students in these courses. And so, with this research that has looked at a decade of participation, we can say we have increased the number of courses available, and we still see these other gaps that we're going to work on in other ways. So not only increasing courses available or teachers for college credit, but in other ways that have to do with schedules and advising and messaging to students. One thing we did this fall was adopt a state vision, which is shared by our Higher Education Coordinating Commission and the Oregon Department of Education. And the vision is sort of a 3-sentence statement about how these programs should be available as opportunities for all students in our schools. And so we're pushing forward with that work, but it's really helpful to have this research to say, we know that expanding just course access isn't enough, and we have to be doing some other things as well.
I can take Jane's question if we want to move to the next one. So no, the teachers do not have to be working towards a master's in the subject area. So in a small number of post-secondary institutions, their sponsored dual credit model does include working towards a master's in the subject area. But for the majority of post-secondary institutions offering courses through the sponsored dual credit model, the high school teachers are not working towards a master's in the subject area. They are qualified to teach through ongoing and intensive professional learning and training.
So I know there are a lot of wonderful questions here. We also have some questions that we want to be able to discuss with the panel as well. I'm wondering if we want to transition to that at this point or try to
I think
get
we
through
can.
some.
Should we answer the questions and you all chime in and add what your expertise? Because we were going to have the panel talk about Oregon State vision, but I think that could come up as we answer these questions, maybe. Would that work? Okay. So Shannon's question from Minnesota is around watering down credentials. And what the release credits look like. So I think that would vary by post-secondary institution and the extent to which the faculty member is involved in sponsored dual credit. In a place like Portland, you'll have faculty who have quite a bit of release time because there's a lot of college credit in the high school happening across the big district, but in a rural area, they might be only doing one PLC once a term. And so that might look a little bit less of a commitment. Does anyone want to add anything to Shannon's question?
I'll just say that this is determined at the institution level. And so there's more than 20 institutions in our state engaging in these partnerships and more than 20 ways that this happens. So if you want to email us, we could get you some more detailed information, maybe by asking some of our higher ed partners to summarize, but there's many ways that it happens.
And I think the data helps with the feeling that it's watering down, because when you see that student outcomes are the same, regardless of the model, then you can get a sense that the curriculum's not being watered down. The students are getting a rigorous experience, a similar rigorous experience, regardless of how the teacher has been qualified, as long as teachers are getting high quality interaction between the K-12 and post-secondary institution. Kate is asking about faculty engagement and the pushback
I think
on faculty time.
That's definitely something that occurred and will occur. Michelle described it well that if you're providing something that the faculty want to do and you're engaging with the faculty that want to do it, they find a way. And so I think in the beginning of these unique arrangements, there weren't as many formal structures for supporting faculty, and that was a problem. And programs did, begin and weren't sustainable in some places, and then returned with other arrangements and became more sustainable. And so I think definitely it's important to work with the faculty who see this as their work, and then grow from there.
Yeah, there's a lot of passion behind this model. So one of the supportive conditions is, yeah, buy-in for seeing it as a student success strategy.
Jason, I see your question about comparing dual enrolled students to students who were never in dual enrollment class. So just to sort of clarify what those different comparison groups were, for the full sample analysis that we did that included everyone, because there are students take lots of different kinds of courses throughout high school, in terms of college credit courses, but then more broadly. And so we created these four different groupings so we could, one, to identify students who were only taking dual credit and only taking sponsored dual credit, a group of students who are taking both, which is a sizable number, and then the group of students who never had any experience with either of those. But students across all four of those groups still did have experiences with advanced placement and international baccalaureate coursework, depending on where they were and what their high school offered. So we made adjustments for those different kinds of patterns and the types of courses students were taking in the analyses. But I think it is important that what we were isolating in these different groups was student participation with these two types of college credit in high school, the dual credit and sponsored dual credit. AP and IB could be present across all four of those groups.
Crystal, do you want to speak to if the advising toolkit addresses first generation students?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of those moments where, and it kind of bleeds into the next question too, right? Because like our first generation college going students may be the ones that just don't understand how to register. And so that's something we have a dual credit coordinators professional group that meets together to sort of brainstorm how to support students through that. That's definitely an outreach piece. That's part of the access toolkit, is helping students understand how and when to register, how and when, why is this course going to help you. It's interesting too, though, when we see those lower enrollments, I don't think we can always assume that that's because they don't know how. For some of them, they're making a decision not to, and that's probably okay. We have some places where we have co-sat or co-rostered, I guess is what they call them in some places, courses where maybe it is a pre-calculus AP class and a college algebra class in the same course. They have the same learning outcomes. Our students who know that they're going to go to college out of state, at a selective college, it may be better for them to have that AP test rather than having a dual credit transcript. And students need to have the agency to be able to make those decisions. So I don't know if I would necessarily want to see 100% enrollment. And that's it's an interesting moment, and that's something that we navigate. And we do have practitioner groups that work on and discuss those problems all the time. The enrollment process, it can be hard too, because our K-12 schedule and our higher education schedules don't mesh. So our process is the same, and those withdrawal dates can be strangely positioned sometimes for our students in the high school. So what we really focus on is making sure that students and families understand what they're registering for, what the withdrawal date is, what's the consequence is if you hit the end of the course and if you're wanting to withdraw and you're past that withdrawal date. Like, we want to make sure that we're being really transparent and really clear. And so that can be, so maybe there may be a student who's like, I want to learn here and I just don't want to enroll. And that also, I think, needs to be an option for our high school students, even though we do encourage them to enroll and make sure that it's not cost, that it's not understanding that is the barrier to that enrollment.
Yeah. So I think we addressed Alessandra's. And so
Yeah.
with Eric, so it's high school faculty, high school teachers teaching college courses. And it's, there's 16 out of 22 institutions now who are approved to offer these courses, and it's a department level decision. College departments are deciding to work with high school teachers to offer these courses. And in those settings, that's a supported program. Outside of departments that don't offer those courses, sponsored dual credit, or institutions that don't do that, I can't speak to what's going on there. But there's 16 institutions with one or multiple departments that are fully supportive of this model in Oregon. Anything else to add from the HEC folks or ODE?
Yeah, I think we are in danger of going over time if we answer too long. But one reason this study is important and looking at the enrollment of all the students sitting in the classroom is that other research that relies only on those who have registered for the college course as the group, the intervention group, and this is a little wonky with research, but it can be a very biased sample, right, of those students who are really high performing in that classroom. And so this is really gratifying to see that all students in that classroom are benefiting from the teaching and learning.
Yeah, and I'll add that in addition to our report and the brief about our report, we also did a policy brief. And I'll put the link to that. And the policy brief includes a little bit more about the sponsored dual credit model itself. Sorry if that link doesn't work. Oh, sorry, that's not the right link. We're getting one more minute. Here we go. Let's see if this link works. And so that might address some of the questions that have come up with what these partnerships look like and how this model works for high school and college faculty.
I saw one other question in the chat about differences between Common Course numbering and CTE coursework. It's not something that we were able to look at in this work. I think that there's a lot of sort of important opportunity to understand more sort of nuanced ways that types of courses that students are taking and what those pathways look like between high school and into post-secondary. So the data exists. It was beyond the scope of this initial work. We are at time. I want to thank everyone for joining, for your great questions. Thank you very much, Aaron, Eric, and Christelle, for all of your involvement and engagement contributions in this work. Appreciate everyone spending time with us this morning to talk more about what's happening in Oregon. Thank you.